Okay, we're going to graph this function, y equals -1/2 x squared plus 2x minus 1. There's two different ways that we can come up with the vertex and the axis of symmetry and all the information that we need to get a good graph. One of them is by completing the square. This one isn't too difficult to complete the square, but we're going to have to factor out that -1/2 from the first two terms of the function. So I'm going to have to take out the -1/2 from the quadratic term, and I'm going to have to factor it out from the linear term. When I factor out, it's the same thing as dividing out. So let me show you. I'm going to show you just these two terms. When I factor out that -1/2, that -1/2 is going to come to the outside, and we divide it out. So we divide it out of each term. So when I divide out from the quadratic term, that leaves me just an x squared. And when I divide it out of the linear term, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And then 2 divided by 1/2, 2 divided by 1/2 is the same thing as multiplying by 2. So that's where I get the 4x from. So now that we can see how we factor out that -1/2, I'm going to come back over here to the left-hand side, and I'm going to take the linear term of 4, cut it in half, which is a 2, and then 2 squared is 4. So it looks like I've added 4, and remember I have that -1. It looks like I've added 4, but really what we've done is we've subtracted 2. -1/2 times 4 is -2. So since we subtracted 2, I'm going to add 2 to the same side of the equation, because we're really only working with one side of the equation. So now I have x minus 2 quantity squared plus 1. My vertex is 2, positive 1. My axis of symmetry is x equals 2. I have two forms that I can work with here. The original form, which is in standard form. I also have now vertex form, which is where I got the vertex from. Standard form is going to allow me to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the value of y when x is 0. So when we put a 0 into standard form, we get a -1. The x-intercept is the value of x when y is 0. So I'm going to use this form right here for that. We're going to put a 0 in for y. And I'm going to solve. So I'll subtract 1 from both sides. I'm going to multiply both sides by -2. And then I'm going to square root both sides. And when I square root both sides, I get a plus or minus. I add 2 to both sides, and we get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. So my x-intercepts are 2 plus the square root of 2, comma 0, and 2 minus the square root of 2, comma 0. Now remember, the square root of 2 is about 1.4. So when I take 2 plus 1.4, I get about 3.4. And when I take 2 minus 1.4, I get about 0.6. So that's where my x-intercepts are on the x-axis, where x is about 3.4, x is about 0.6. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to plot all these points. My vertex was 2, 1. I can do the 1, 3, 5 rule. I can put values in and get values out and then reflect them over. There's lots of different ways that you can graph this. If we put, for instance, if we put a 0 in, we know that when we put 0 in, we get our -1, which is our y-intercept. So I've got those points right there. We saw for the x-intercepts, they were about 3.4 and 0.6. So about 0.6, 1, 2, 3.4-ish. So we have a graph that's looking like this. If I put, because of that 1/2 there, that kind of is going to have me put values in that are, did I do that right? 2 plus 1.4-ish, 2 minus 1.4-ish. My graph just looks weird. 3.4.6. I think it's just because of the way I'm graphing. I'm just not being real careful here, and it looks like a sketch that's all kind of messed up. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so if I put in 2, 3, 4, if I put a 6 in, 6 minus 2, I'm going to put a 6 in here. 6 minus 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. -1/2 times 16 is -8. -8 plus 1 is -7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -7. And then reflect it over, -7. Nope. I went over. I think it's supposed to be here. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, when we put a 6 in, we get -7 out. There we go. Beautiful. So our y-intercept 0, -1. Our x-intercept's 2 plus the square root of 2, comma 0. 2 minus the square root of 2, comma 0. The vertex was 2, 1. The axis of symmetry, x equals 2. Domain, all real numbers. And the range is -infinity to +1. And that's how we do that.